Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Edufuturists podcast. We are super excited to be with you again. This is fun. We're having lots and lots of fun, lots of great conversations off the back of the BET episodes that we've released recently, as well as some of our most recent conversations. And tonight is going to be no exception. I said tonight, depends what time you're listening, but we're recording in an evening for us. But our guest, all the way from the other side of the pond, is not at night time. Charlie, would you give us a little bit of an introduction to you and the role that you currently play?
Certainly, and thanks, Ben, for having me. So yes, it's afternoon here, 1 o'clock in the afternoon as we were recording this. And my name is Charlie Radman, and I'm the Global Head of Education for HP. So the computer manufacturing company that everyone seems to know, not the HP sauce that is so popular where you're at, but more on the technology side.
Yeah, and I suppose, Charlie, step it, for those people that are maybe in education rather than the tech sector, so some people think it's a big job to be a superintendent or lead in a school or anything else. Global Head of Education, that sounds a massive job because there's a lot of people in the world right now. So what does that look like? I suppose even just, I'm guessing no days are the same, no weeks are the same, but what does that role entail at HP? And maybe a little bit more of detail on that one, if that's okay.
Yeah, certainly. So yes, the title sounds maybe sometimes more impressive than it is, or maybe not. It all depends on the week, quite honestly. But what I'm really responsible for is I have a very small team of experts who work across all of the different product divisions inside of HP, all the different segments inside of HP, to make sure that inside of HP, we understand what educational needs are and where education is going and how to make sure the technology actually improves education and doesn't do more harm than good, which in some cases, let's be honest, technology hasn't always lived up to the promises, right? And so we try to make sure that moving forward, we do live up to those promises. Beyond that, I'm really focused on setting our long-term strategy. Where is education going? How can we make sure that we're prepared for where it's going in the next 3 to 5 years? And then outside of that, I spend the majority of my time working internationally. So I meet with lots of ministries of education. I work very closely with folks like UNESCO, the Brookings Institute, with COSIN and Digital Promissory in the United States, Asian Development Bank, African Development Bank, trying to understand what their priorities are for helping countries with digital transformation, education improvement goals, and how really we can mirror the technology and what technology is capable of doing to help them achieve wherever they're trying to get their education systems to go.
So listening to that, and obviously the partnership element is probably crucial to that. And in fact, I don't say probably, it's definitely crucial. Listening to that, like knowing that you're working with some of these incredible global organizations and the part that HP plays in that. It might just be a bit left field, but I think it's a cool place to go starting where it's like that partnership work. How are you successful in that? Because some of the conversations that we see with educators and some of our listeners on our ear, they'll be working with organizations that they might not have exact alignment on business and on values and other, but what does good partnership look like? Maybe is just a start of a 10.
Yeah, I mean, and it's very difficult, quite honestly. It's much harder than you think it should be, quite honestly. I mean, we all want to do good, but we all kind of approach it differently. And so what I value as a good partner is someone who understands what they can bring to a situation. Certainly HP, we have very philanthropic goals. We have digital equity goals that we're trying to achieve. We see education as a cornerstone of those goals. But in addition to that, we just want to do good in the world. I mean, this has been part of HP's DNA since the very beginning of the company. And we just kind of want to do good. But we also know that we can't solve these problems by ourselves. One of my big passion projects that Ben and Steve, you probably saw at BET, is I'm really focused on the global teacher crisis as an example. I'm just blown away that the world's going to be short 44 million teachers by 2030, half of which are teachers in the job today, 22 million teachers in the job today who are going to leave between today and 2030 and have no one to come in and backfill, right? That's a big problem. And I see that as a big problem. HP sees that as a big problem. But the downside is we're a large company. I can't write a check big enough to solve that problem. I can't go out and just give enough computers away to solve that problem. We have to partner. We have to partner with organizations. We have to partner with private entities such as ourselves. We have to partner with governments. We have to partner with nonprofits and NGOs and world financing. All have a stake in this. And that's how we then start to address the problems. And we can't solve all of the problems, right? I can't change personally the way the teachers get paid. And we all know that teachers should get paid way more than teachers get paid today. And they work way more hours than the standard full-time job. I can't solve that, but through partnerships and through using HP's might, so to speak, and using the might of others in the industry, we can go and try and lobby. We can try and influence policy. We can try and influence what governments pay teachers. And then that's what I see as a successful partnership. When you're able to come in and bring your value, but also know where you need others, and then let them shine where their value is and bring in their roles as well. So that's probably a long-winded answer to get to your question. But I mean, I think that's really the value of partnerships is no one entity can solve all of these issues and what's going on in education today, but we all have to partner together because we all have a stake in it.
It's really interesting. And I think if we were to have put a poll out to educators, if we'd have put a poll out to educators, if we'd have put, and asked them a question, what does tech, not specifically HP, but what does tech do for you? What does it do to help you? And we gave them even 4 answers. It'd have been interesting to see the percentage of people that would have said HP is working in partnership to try and increase teacher salary and all those different things. And I'm not saying that that's just the one thing, but I think people, like you've said, tech has not always been great. It's had some issues, whether that's actually policymakers at times where ultimately they've tried to do a rollout, a refresh and tried to get the big shiny thing and the bit that they're famous for and the impact. But I don't think people often see the hard work that often goes behind the scenes with people like yourself, Charlie, that are trying to improve things with these big partnerships to actually lobby and try and influence these people to then say, well, we've got quite a big money, we've got some big power, you need to listen to us and pull together to make that power and that strength and that voice even louder. I'm sure you can't share everything, but what does it even look like? I know you've told us a little bit, but like, how does one, or I'm just thinking globally, is it country by country? Is that bit where actually when you're facilitating those conversations in terms of HP is an organisation, let's say keep it to HP right now. You can't do everything. You've only got a certain amount of investment, whether that's money, whether that's time, whatever that be. Is it then looking at where you can potentially have the biggest influence or where some of those policymakers and those change makers have the biggest potential impact or openness to change and then target there? Is that you're picking off the low-lying fruit? Is that the approach in times?
It's all of the above, honestly, Steve. Quite honestly, it's trying to address all of the above. There are some commonalities that, regardless of what country you're in, seems to just be the norm. You know, the dignity, perhaps, of the teaching profession has pretty much dropped globally. You know, I think I can call out a couple of countries where teachers are still held in high regards, but in most countries, you know, that has dropped. The workload, quite honestly, is exorbitant regardless of the country you're in. So there are some commonalities across all countries, but then context matters. And I think one of the things that so often is a failure of when people try to address these big global challenges and these big global crises is they forget the context matters, in that there are local needs and there are local issues that have to be addressed that are very unique to that area. And so we try to address both sides of the coin, so to speak. We try to work across the very big commonalities. Where can we make some very big global change and very big dents in the problem? And then where can we also get in and be very, very scrappy at the local level and really try and help teachers really in small communities just address the biggest challenges that they may have. And that's through a lot of programs. I mean, just transparently, we run a lot of different programs, whether they be online courses. We have a computers basic course that we created for teachers because we met with all these ministries of education who said, hey, it's great you guys are talking about technology and AI and all this amazing stuff. And my teachers are still trying to use, the basics of computers and don't know how to do that. So we created a course on that. We created a course and a program called HP Idea, which goes in and really helps you just become a better teacher, not even with technology, just pedagogically. How do you, make you a better teacher? And so it depends on, really the market, but we'll go in and we'll try and see what does that market need, or what does that specific country or community need? And then how can we be of assistance? And sometimes we can't. And by the way, it's okay to acknowledge that too. Right? It's okay to acknowledge as a big company, listen, the challenge here is not something that we can solve or we can, dip our toe into and influence. But at the same time, where we can, we absolutely will.
Yeah, and you mentioned quite a few initiatives that you've got going on, and I don't know, you've a big part of your role and a big passion of yours is obviously the teacher shortage. But I know that at HP, one of the big things that has been focused on, I was involved with HP. Those people know that I was at a tech company for 3.5 years, and I had the wonderful nature to work with HP for a period. But one of the things I loved passionately about HP was its focus on sustainability. We talked about BET right at the beginning, and the introduction has come from Melanie Tagg of Future Source, and thanks, Melanie, for the connection. We really appreciate it. But I think it was about 3 years ago where we were looking at BET and we were looking at all the different things. And for those people in the UK that go to BET, or all those people in Europe, or even those in the US who were lucky to go to BET, you go to these things like ISTE, and a lot of the stands look wonderful. But then you look and you think, not just the device into the tech, but you think, how sustainable is this? And I know HP did a big drive where they were saying everything on our stand will be able to be kind of not raffled off, but picked and taken away. And I know HP is beyond that. It's about ocean plastics and sustainability. And I know that ultimately the most sustainable device is the one that you've got. But everything goes through in regards to actually, if you are going to step into your refresh cycle and everything else that goes with that, what does that look like from the packaging, from the device, from the CPU, everything, the movable? What does that look like as a big, and why is HP so passionate about it, I suppose?
Well, I mean, we're passionate about it because we understand that we need to leave this world in a better place than we found it, quite honestly. And, this company has been around for a really long time. We're coming up on 80 years that this company has existed. And we want to be around not just for another 80 years, but 160 years beyond that. And the only way we're going to survive is, quite honestly, we need to have a world that we are doing good in. And that's just very transparent. It's not just economically correct. And I'll be honest with you, it is economically correct because people are starting to be aware, but it's also truly our own conscience telling us that we need to do better, right? We in the industry need to do better. And so you're absolutely right. All of our products, every single product now that we sell includes recycled ocean-bound plastics, right? That would have ended up in the ocean, except for we redirected it into our product. We have changed all of our packaging. We've tried to reduce the amount of disposables in our packaging. We want everything on the package or inside the package to be recyclable. And in fact, the newest thing that HP is really focused on is something called Renew, which is taking back all of these devices now and refurbishing them, either, turning them out into better devices for underserved communities to where they can still add great value, but not be just a first life product, right? We build this thing now for what's called Second Life, where it's not the video game Second Life, but it's the it's Second Life in the world, knowing that it's going to now be, owned by more than one person. We think about that from the very beginning of the design of the product because we want it to exist that way. We want it to, continue to add good in the world. And so you're absolutely right. Everything that we look at from a sustainability point of view really is part of us realizing the impact that technology has on the environment and on the world, but also trying to do the best we can to offset that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's that the thing that we've talked about often is influencing in, but also influencing out. And what I love is that ultimately the whole thing is, the UN Sustainability Development Goal. I think is number 4. Is it number 4? I think it's number 4.
Well, 4 is education.
Yeah, so education, but ultimately that whole thing around actually how does it align with the strategy? What does that look like? Influencing nations, but also influencing your sector and the sector of education to make those decisions, be more influenced and say, hey, you know what? We'll lead by example. And maybe some of those bits that, I know you've talked about some bits there, but what else has HP done? What has it tried to influence beyond just like those bits like that where like as a market leader, I guess I'm trying to get to, what does that look like where you've said, we're going to make this difference, we're going to make this change, we're going to do it on our own, we want to make an impact for the future and beyond just this generation. And I'm guessing others have taken up that mantle, not just in the device space, but beyond that. And maybe we can talk at that for a bit.
Certainly. I mean, even, let's start at the device though, because everything kind of, for us starts at the device and then moves beyond that. We've changed our supply chain. We've changed the commodities and the components inside, the chips and the way that they're manufactured and the way they're delivered and the way they're stored. We've changed all of that in our supply chain to make sure that it's climate feasible to even just build the product, right? So it started there, and then you have the product, and then we absolutely do want to try and influence how others respond as well, right? So we talk a little bit about policy. We try and influence to where governments, when they do large tenders for education purchases, that they call out sustainability in that request, right? So that it's important to them, it's important to their taxpayers, it's important to their population, but that they, only work with people who are going to meet these goals and meet these needs. And so it's really important to try and move the needle forward, sometimes forcibly and sometimes through influence, but, we really want to see everyone respond in a positive way to the impact that technology has.
Yeah, and I think for partners, for educators, there's certification, there's courses. What I love is just that whole ecosystem of, we're probably seen as this, but we're going to try and support here as well, because ultimately, by better educating, it's not just about your devices. If your device is using ocean-bound plastics, great, but if the only driver to a decision is money and finance is actually really playing a part in education and everything else, if you can advise and guide the consumer, if you can advise and guide parents who are buying, generally the 16-year-olds are probably going out and getting a HP Chromebook. They might do, but ultimately it might be a request and everything else. If you're then influencing educators, leaders, decision makers in those bits by just those, ultimately HP is a multi-billion pound business. Obviously, it's a business, of course, but ultimately, the intention is to make an impact, and profit and revenue is a byproduct of success, not the other way around. So, yeah, it's great to see and everything else. And I know that on top of the sustainability stuff, you've been doing a lot of work around equity, and they have equity goals and all those kind of things. And I know that there was a big target. I think it was like a 3-figure million target of was it 150 million
Correct.
people or certain by stuff like that. And maybe talk at those. And I know we're going through different things, but the things I've seen is like HP Life and inclusive and focused and what does equity mean to HP? And what would you like to see in terms of your position, in terms of the influence that you've had, but also the influence going forward greater?
Yeah, so, you're right. We do have a massive equity goal. So a few years ago, we came out with a digital equity goal, and we're calling it very specifically digital equity. And it's a digital equity goal of 150 million people by 2030. And of that, we're very specifically calling out marginalized communities, women and girls, practitioners, historically marginalized communities. And we really want to ensure that not only is it an access to device and connectivity, I mean, that is the very beginning of equity, certainly of digital equity. If you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that's kind of the baseline, is you have to have a device and you have to have connectivity. But then we look at it as much greater than that. So digital equity to us goes far beyond just that level. It's also, do you know how to use the device, right? Digital literacy is a huge, huge problem. So just making sure that somebody has a device doesn't mean that they're going to get the best out of it. In fact, I have this debate all the time with people that I personally don't believe that there's anything called a digital native. I don't think anybody is still a digital native, even though you've been born around technology this whole time. I have kids that have never had a life without technology. But that doesn't mean that they're digitally native. What it means is that they're digitally fearless in a way, but they don't actually know how to use the technology much better than I do. And in fact, I would argue in many cases, just because you know how to go to TikTok and you know how to go to Instagram and you know how to take the best selfie in the world, doesn't necessarily mean you're a digital native or you know how to get the best out of technology. So we really are focused on digital equity of making sure that not only do you have a great device and that you have hopefully good connectivity, but also on top of that, you know exactly how to get the most out of it. If you want to be an entrepreneur, how do I use this device to be an entrepreneur, to set up that business I always wanted to start, to participate in this global economy? We see all of that as being part of digital equity. And certainly there's an education component to that. Because we know in so many places in the world that out of the last global industrial revolutions, they've not been able to participate. They've either been left out of it entirely, or they've been the workforce behind the industrial revolution, but not necessarily benefiting from the industrial revolution. We see technology as being that great equalizer, democratizing access for people, and then really leveling the playing field. And that's truly what equity is lifting those up who need it the most and making sure that everyone has an equal playing field to participate and really get the benefits out of what technology can deliver.
I love it. I think what's really interesting is not just giving people a seat at the table, not even giving them the plate. And I think it was Lawrence Tajani, a good friend of ours who's in equity and diversity. He's also a real good partner of ours and everything else. But Lawrence talks about it's not just the seat at the table; it's the skills and the tools to actually do it. So when you said digital native, I'm trying to think what phrase is more appropriate. It's like they're digital inhabitants. They've lived in it. They understand it. They've lived in it. They've understanding it. They've worked in it. They've communicated in it. But ultimately, it's like my kids. They might live in the house, but they don't know how to utilize the tools in the kitchen. They don't know how to make their own bed. They don't know, if the fact that you turn this tap or you go too close to the radiator, it's going to scold you. They have to, like you said, they're fearless, but they have to have an understanding of actually how they can be supported by adults to be guided through that experience. And I think they live in a digital world. They've been born into a digital world, but it doesn't mean they're any safer, any more secure, more understanding. But also, their ability to apply things to context is a real challenge. That they might be able to make a TikTok video, but what does that look like as a creative as it goes through, and all those kind of things. And I think that's a real great way to explain it. That HB is then coming in and going, it's not just access to a device, because ultimately we need to support you as young people and educators to utilize it, but it's also the right device, the right tool, the right education, the right support. And yeah, I can see you nodding along as if you want to come in, Charlie. Go for it. Go on.
Yeah, the only other thing I was going to say is it's not just about just the right device and getting the right access and how to use the technology, but right now, we are at the precipice of the world changing, certainly with AI, right? And now with this whole AI revolution that's happening, it's making sure that they have complete contextual awareness of what that really is going to benefit them for, but also what are the big challenges, right? Critical thinking right now is more important than I think ever before in at least in my lifetime of questioning the answers we get back and making sure we fully understand the answers we get back. Making sure that, yes, they can benefit from all these great tools, but they're also very aware of how they all work, right? I think is really important, because if you just believe the device, so to speak, are we any better off than not having access at all, right? I don't think we necessarily are. I will say something here very controversial. I'm sure you guys love controversial things on your podcast, but think about what just came out like a week and a half ago or 2 weeks ago with DeepSeek, right? Everyone was talking about DeepSeek the week I was at BET, and that was like on everybody's mind, so to speak. And one of the things that occurred to me very quickly, and I'm sure you guys have seen this in the news, when you ask it certain questions, it won't give you an answer. It very politely tells you that it can't give you an answer to certain questions. And so it has been programmed to sanitize certain responses. Well, if it can be programmed to sanitize certain responses, how are we supposed to trust any answer we get back without critically thinking our way through it, without questioning it, without understanding what's behind it? Where did it come from? Why did it come up with the answer it did? Because clearly it can be programmed to change an answer to make somebody look good, make somebody look bad, raise things up, lower things. I think it's very apparent and very important, rather, that as part of digital literacy and as part of digital equity, that you think about all of these things, that you learn about all of this technology in that way, so that you're best prepared to, again, capitalize from it, but also not be taken advantage by it at the same time.
Yeah. Well, I'm back. I know that nobody even missed me who's listening to it, but for you two who are laughing that I've come back in and out, I've been in and out quicker than a yo-yo, like a jack in a box. And Steve, I know, will have ably talked about. I heard conversations around sustainability. You were talking about some of the AI elements that are sat in there as well. And one thing that I know that Steve was intimating at earlier, and I think it'd be great for us to develop is that conversation that you have been working on in terms of HP Futures. And like, when I heard about this, I thought this is cool. And I also thought, having been at the same organisation, and I did a little bit of digging, you've been at the same organisation, you got your 25-year certificate and badge, right? So you've been at HP 25 years, long service, so you'll have seen leadership at all different levels. But I wonder if you could maybe just tell us a little bit about the HP Futures project, and then from a leadership perspective, like what's the passion there?
So I think so HP Futures is a sister program of also another program that we're running in conjunction with BET, right? And so it's this collaborative. Again, we can't solve all these problems on our own. And by the way, HP should never come in and tell governments and teachers and educators how to do their job. That is not our role, right? We should stay in certain lanes, and that is a lane we shouldn't come in. But we can bring the right experts together who can help you transform your education systems and who have an opinion. And so HP Futures, along with this other side program or the sister program that we're doing kind of with BET, is really focused on bringing experts into the room from a broad cross-section of stakeholders and letting them express their knowledge and opinion, and also have really passionate discourse. And I'm a big proponent that discourse matters, right? That we need to have discourse. If everyone comes into a room and agrees, that is the worst thing possible. And, if I had hair, I would pull it out kind of thing, because I don't want that. I want people to come in and get scrappy and really start to figure out, like, how do we really transform these education systems? What is that going to look like? And then once we kind of all come up to some kind of agreement, or sometimes not, by the way, and it's okay to not agree, but where are the commonalities? And then come out with thought leadership pieces on how to best move forward. And that's what both Futures does, as well as, again, the sister program we're doing with BET, which is really focused on creating white papers, creating thought leadership pieces, but also recipe guides. And this is the very next thing that you're going to see come out of both of these programs, which is very tactical recipe guides saying, do this, do this, do this. And just like when you're baking a cake, if you do these 3 things, the chances of you getting a good outcome, a delicious outcome if it's a cake, Well, the chances of getting a good education outcome will improve significantly if you do these things. And this is how you want to transform your system. This is how you want to change education systems. This is what we recommend doing based on all these amazing minds that we're able to bring together. And that's the great part about being in the role that I'm in and being in an organization like HP is we get to pick up the phone, and I can tell you not very many people don't take our calls. Right. And so when I call somebody up at the World Bank, or I call somebody up at UNESCO, or I call somebody up in the UN or UNICEF and say, hey, we are working on X, Y, and Z, and we would really love for you to come in and share your great knowledge, they will. And we love being able to do that. And that's one of the best parts of my job. Quite honestly, every single day is being able to talk to all these amazing people and find out how do we transform this and how do we come out better on the other side.
Just on that, actually, I'm just thinking about, and I don't know whether this transcends across the pond, but in the UK, there's a massive burst of something called HelloFresh, and is it Gaucho and all those kind of things. So I'm just thinking in terms of that recipe guide.
Well, just before we go any further, Steve's like, Gaucho, what even are these things? Steve grows his own vegetables. He definitely gets the things as cheap as he can. For the little context here, he's a Yorkshireman, doesn't like spending as much money.
I'll drink out of a dirty puddle, Charlie. I'll drink out of a dirty puddle if it's still classed as good water. But I think taking it beyond just that recipe guide, so if you say to people, ultimately, you do these things and this will be a positive outcome, it could that, or does it, or is the potential to extend it where ultimately, because of everybody coming together in partnership, where you buy this, and we'll give you the ingredients together exactly how you might come into it. So it could be, I know it's not just, I'm just giving examples where it could be the resources that you need to support that kit to really make the meal full stop when you're a complete novice or you're a really immature nation or council or whatever that looks like. Is that step into it? Is that something that's been worked on? If not, have I just coined something and do I need to trademark it pretty quickly? I just think it would be a wonderful thing because so many people like recipes and like cooking. There are loads of people that just don't know what the ingredients is, and also then go, don't need a full clove of garlic because I'm not cooking that for that many people. And I think that would really, really help. So maybe if you want to respond to that.
Yeah, so it's absolutely something that we're looking at. In fact, coming out of BET this year, one of the things that I heard resoundingly over and over and over again, whether I was talking to teachers or IT buyers or ministries of education, is there is so much choice here. What do I even choose and where do I even begin, right? And that is a problem right now in the industry, right? So many choices is no choice at all because you're ultimately paralyzed because you're like, if I choose that, and ultimately it's going to be, I needed to choose that other thing. And, I made a mistake right off the bat. And so I'm just not going to make any decision right now. And so we are coming out, hopefully within the next 60 to 90 days, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed, we are actually coming out with kind of a step-by-step guide, not recommending any actual solution. We're never going to actually go in and say, go buy these guys versus go buy these guys. That's not our intent. It's what should you look at? What should you consider when you're actually, investing in technology? And these are the things you specifically should ask. These are the questions you specifically should ask when you're actually going to invest in that technology. We're going to mirror that with the big UNESCO framework. So you guys hopefully your audience have seen, the Digital Transformation Coalition, the DTC out of UNESCO, has come up with this amazing framework of what you should think about when you invest in technology. And what we're going to try to do is take that framework, because we're part of that coalition, and then go down to the next level and turn it into a very tactical response. So for each part of the framework, we're going to say, now this is specifically what we recommend you start to think about into each one of these components. That, I think, is very, very powerful. Now, again, context matters. And this is the big thing is, when you do something at a global level, you need to make sure it's responsible for what's going to happen in each one of those markets. And so for us, we're really focused on ensuring that whatever we recommend not only works at a global level, but it will also translate into what's going on at the local level. And so we're trying to make sure that we come up with a toolkit that can meet both of those goals. But you're absolutely right. We are absolutely trying to come up with that perfect kit that's not only the technology, but the recipe to go along with it to say, okay, you've got this in a box, you've got all this, but now here's how you all put it together to get the best outcome and have, to your point, a delicious meal at the end of it. And also to ensure that you're not overbuying, that you don't have all this waste at the end that you're, putting in the rubbish.
That's that last bit is as important, right? It's not about just, let's keep buying and selling more. It's quite refreshing to hear this from a global company at the size of HP, that somebody at this level is now saying it's not just about selling more devices, selling more software, selling more hardware. That cannot be the sustainable answer into that space. And from a sustainability, ecological, climate conversation, but also from a equity issue, from the fact that there's always been such a digital divide that people are just keep thinking it's the next best thing. That we talk about shiny new toy syndrome all the time, and that's probably one of the biggest challenges that we found, right? And you'll be the same, that you'll be working with organisations where it's, we need new this. Well, if somebody had just had a little bit of gumption, and not even gumption, I think it's integrity. I think what I'm hearing from what you're talking about is a level of integrity, and it's quite refreshing to hear.
Well, and when you start to think about technology, there are schools that we visit and, spend time with in rural parts of India, for example. You know what they need? They don't need a laptop that does AI and can do all these amazing things. They need a new box of chalk and a new slate, because that's what they learn with, right? That's the technology that is most beneficial right now for them today. So that's what we should invest in. We should not just invest in, hey, you got to go buy the next greatest laptop and use it. And, oh, by the way, you only get so much electricity a day, and you're going to now spend it to, charge up your device. We want to meet the teachers where they are today. We want to meet students where they are today, and then we want to help them improve from that point forward. But it's not just about a device. I'm the tech guy, and I will tell you more often than not, shut the tech off half the time or more, right? It's not just about the tech. It's getting the right value out of the tech than just selling tech itself.
I don't really want to segue away from tech and then back into it, but I know that you mentioned AI, and one of the things that I'm really interested in is not necessarily the tech and everything else, but I know that you've got the whole thing around the hackathons and the approaches, and ultimately, if in parts of Africa and Rwanda or part of India or anything else where ultimately they're not as developed in terms of, not the whole continent, we're talking about individual cases, extending AI and the hackathon and those approaches to those countries, as well as the countries that are developed. What does that look like? And does it surprise you that even with some of the lack of resource from some of that actually you still see some real opportunities and some real things that develop out, and the amount of submissions that come out of these programs? Does that surprise you? Is that a bit when
it actually is? It does surprise me, but it also was like this massive amount of joy, quite honestly, seeing what some of these people come up with, and especially very young students come up with to try to solve problems in their community when they aren't constrained by what they think technology can do or what they were, told at some point technology they can do. They come up with the most outlandish ideas that are just like revolutionary, right? And that kind of stuff just blows me away. And when you do these hackathons and they come in and they tell you, this is the problem I'm trying to solve, and this is how I see technology's role in trying to solve it, and this is what I would do, with AI to try to solve that. You're like, man, I never thought of that. And I can look at all these engineers who are, sitting around the room, and often I'd love to be on these pitch decks or these pitch competitions where they come out after the hackathon and tell you what their grand idea is. And I look around at all these executives whose minds are just blown. They just sit there in just kind of complete awe going, I would have never, ever thought of doing it that way or using the technology for this. And the beautiful part about it is they are so unconstrained by the way they were raised with technology or now raised without it, right? That they think about it so vastly differently. I think that is incredibly powerful. And the other thing, just really quick on AI, is we need to show communities the value that it's going to bring. Absolutely, they need to see the value it's going to bring, because there is this bifurcation that's going to happen. People who have AI skills are going to go further than people who don't. You need to, certainly understand and invest in it now. But at the same time, where we are in AI's development, these people need to start getting involved now. They need to start having influence now. They need to start entering the data in there now, because if they wait much longer, it will not be relevant. That's the downside, right? And so we need their voices. We need them in there creating their own prompts. We need them in there putting their data in constantly, so that it's taken into consideration in these large language models, so that by the time they do start to use it in mass, they're not just wiped out because it's already been trained on all this other data. So it's very, very, very imperative that we have them participating at this point and moving forward.
I love where you've gone with that, because obviously AI is always going to be a huge theme on what we've been talking about, and not just since November 2022. It was invented before that. We say that on a semi-regular joke, right? But that idea that the voices and the diversity of voices, and actually that particularly the underrepresented voices or the historically marginalized voices, we do need to actively work to bring those people into that space. And it's lovely to be able to see. In fact, lovely doesn't seem to be a fair enough phrase. It's quite, again, inspiring to see that trying to bring those marginalized and underrepresented communities in to be able to hear their perspectives and getting them into that AI space is really, really is powerful. And I think what that makes me really think about is, okay, well, if this is where the global organizations are going in terms of their trajectory, their MO, this is not just like, oh, this is what we'd like to do in the future, actively doing that now in terms of the AI academies and the hackathons and the future leaders, all the things that are happening. These are not just, oh, these would be a good idea for them to do. They're literally on the ground happening right now, aren't they? So that's cool. We always end our podcast, and we're really grateful for your time, but we always end our podcast with quick fire questions. Now, to be fair, you've got the floor, so it doesn't have to be like one word, but I'll do one, Steve will do one, and then I'll do another one to finish with. Just three quick fire questions. So, what's one outdated educational practice that we need to abandon?
Sage on the stage. Absolutely, we need to abandon this whole concept that a teacher stands in front of a class and lectures and lectures and lectures, and you need to learn by rote, and they have this sage on the stage mentality. We need to get away from that. We need to start thinking student-centric every single day.
Awesome. Great answer. How should we measure learning success beyond grades?
Growth. We need to measure how a student is improving beyond the grades. If they started out in an F or in a failing grade, but they are continually improving, and you see that they're continually putting effort in and they're trying, that should count as much, if not more, than moving from one grade level to another, or one point system to another. Growth is so vitally important, and that's the way we really should be looking at student achievement.
Love that. I love that. Again, what's one thing that you'd want our listeners to remember?
Wow, now that's a hard question. I think the big thing to remember is that technology is an amazing tool. It truly is. It democratizes access when used appropriately. It opens up doors that weren't previously opened for a lot of people. At the same time, human connection is so vitally important. And things that we used to almost take for granted, we used to call them soft skills of learning to network and talk to each other and problem solve and collaborate and communicate, all of those things. Those are now power skills. Those are the critical things that we need. And so, yes, technology is great, and I'm going to always be a big proponent of technology, but focus just as much on the power skills as you do on the technology skills.
An absolute blast, Charlie Radman. We knew it was going to hit the mark. If anybody's ever spent any time with you, we know. And I think hopefully what this will be in terms of the people listening will be thought leadership in it to make a difference. And we talked about that, didn't we? The purpose and the mission is beyond just the profit. Loads of initiatives. If people want to go away, we can put it into the show notes in regards to some of the great work that HP is doing, some of the things we've called out. We can put that in there. But yeah, it's been an absolute blast, mate. I've loved having a conversation with you. And I'm excited for everybody to listen to it. So yeah, pleasure. Have a good one.
You're going to have me over for dinner the next time I'm over, right?
Absolutely.
But I'm tight, so let's maybe get a gaucho or a Hello Fresh.
Hello Fresh. You might need to bring your own vegetables, Charlie.
Yeah.
No, thanks for joining us, buddy. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Shaping the next generation. Dancing to the rhythm, catching every beat. Together we embrace the futures at our feet. The futures at